Hello there. It's a rainy New Year's Eve in New Zealand, and here to taste I've got a Pinot Noir from one of the Otago region's top producers, Valli. It's a 2017 Pinot Noir, so hopefully fully mature, and this is their Waitaki Vineyard's Pinot Noir, which is actually from North Otago. And I think one of the things that's exciting about New Zealand's Pinot Noirs is the diversity of styles and expressions that are being developed throughout the country. There's an almost Burgundian variety of expression. And in the Otago region, Valli have been one of the pioneers of the exploration of these styles, as they make 4 different sub-regional Pinot Noirs from Gibbston, Bannockburn, Bendigo, and in this case the 4th of those wines from the Waitaki Vineyard in North Otago, which is really quite a challenging place to be growing Pinot Noir. Now, Valli Estate is named after Giuseppe Valli, who is the great-great-grandfather of Grant Taylor and Tim Valli, who were the winery's founders. And it was Giuseppe who came to New Zealand in the 1870s, following his brother, who'd come to the Otago region because of the gold rush, but brought his huge winemaking knowledge with him. Now, Grant Taylor, one of the co-proprietors of Valli, is one of the Central Otago region's pioneering winemakers. He has over 40 vintages under his belt, having grown up in Central Otago, studied winemaking at Lincoln College in Canterbury. His winemaking career, however, began in California in the 1980s, where he was part of the team that established Pine Ridge Winery and then went on to help found Domaine Napa. In 1993, however, Grant came home to Central Otago to become winemaker at Gibbston Valley. And at that time, there was something like 50 hectares of vines planted in the whole of Central Otago region. I believe there are actually more vines now planted in North Otago than there were at that stage in the whole of Otago. Today, there's somewhere just short of 2,000 hectares of vines planted in the region. Now, Grant made the wines at Gibbston Valley for 13 years before he left to concentrate on Valli and its wines. Throughout his career in New Zealand, however, he made the first wines for a number of now very famous estates, places like Mount Edward, Mount Difficulty, Felton Road, Peregrine, Carrick, Rockburn, Bald Hills, Hawkshead, Mondillo. And so it was in 1998, while he was still the winemaker at Gibbston Valley, that Grant teamed up with his cousin Tim Valli to found the Valli Winery. Evidently, Tim concentrates on vineyard management and winery maintenance. They purchased 6.5 hectares of land in the Gibbston Valley and set out with the idea of producing premium single vineyard wines that highlight the styles and the differences between Otago's different sub-regions. Now, Grant's winemaking has largely concentrated on Pinot Noir. In 1995, for instance, he helped consult setting up the Archery Summit Vineyard, a renowned Pinot Noir producer in Oregon, and he has consulted there for more or less every vintage since then. He's also worked extensively in Burgundy at Domaine Dujac. And today, Grant is joined in the winemaking at Valli by somebody called Jen Parr. Jen is a native of Oregon, but had previously worked in Central Otago at the Olson's Winery, which is now Terra Sancta, and Jen joined Valli in 2015, so a couple of years before this wine was made. So the Waitaki Valley is a small wine region in North Otago, pretty much on the east coast of New Zealand's South Island, and the region has a cool, almost cold climate that's just at the margins of what's suitable for viticulture. Now, Valli don't own this vineyard. They buy in this fruit, but consistently from the same vineyard every year. The vineyard was one of the first vineyards planted in this region in 2001, and the clones used to plant it were a fairly typical variety there. There's some UC Davis 5, there's some of the Dijon clone 115, there's the Abel clone, there's another more recent Dijon clone 777. We're told that planting density is 5,000 vines to the hectare, so not particularly dense, and that the vines are trellised to vertical shoot positionings, so in a fairly narrow vertical hedge that keeps the vines in to prevent there being too much shading. So this is a region that's best known for making elegant, delicate, highly perfumed Pinot Noirs that really are much more delicate than their Central Otago counterparts. However, it has to be said that the region's low yields, cold climate and remoteness, particularly from tourism centres, has seen some of the region's higher profile producers draw back from working there. Now, the Waitaki Valley runs from the southern Alps down to the Pacific Ocean. Evidently, the translation of the name Waitaki is more or less the tiers of Mount Cook. So Mount Cook, the highest mountain in the southern Alps here. And the river is quite a broad river comprising a number of braided channels. And most of the viticulture here takes place in the Hakatakamea Valley, which is between Dundoon and Lake Waitaki, just on the slopes beside the river. So as of 2020, the region had about 60 hectares of vines planted. Mostly Pinot Noir, it's also Riesling, Pinot Gris and Chardonnay. The vineyards here are predominantly on stony soils. This is necessary to radiate heat back into the canopy and to maintain temperatures at night. Now, the soil composition varies from underlying limestone to greywacke and schist-based soils. These are low fertility soils and they're well drained, and this forces the vines to create a deep root structure as the roots go sort of searching for the essential nutrients they need. The result being that you get strong, healthy vines producing a small crop of concentrated fruit. The Waitaki Vineyard that Valli use, it has a limestone based soil with river gravel spread throughout it. Now, as far as the climate's concerned, this is an ultra cool region. The summers are moderated by cooling onshore breezes from the ocean, and there have been vintages where some vines have failed to produce fruit at all. The region's also susceptible to frost both in spring and in autumn, but thankfully the rain shadow that's created by the Southern Alps is sufficient to ensure there's almost never any mildew pressure. Now, 2017 was quite a cool growing season even for North Otago, and it saw harvest coming in just at the end of April and sometimes into early May, but this has resulted in a beautiful, fragrant, delicate style of wine with fine tannins and lively aromas. Just some statistics they give here: approximately 800 growing degree days in the season, so not a large amount of sunshine, and approximately 530 millimetres of rainfall in an average year. So harvest for this wine came in the 28th of April and the 1st of May 2017. Yields were quite low, just 2 tonnes to the hectare. Now, fermentation went on in open top fermenters, and while most of the fruit was destemmed, 10% of it was left as whole bunches. We're told that the temperature of fermentation reached a peak at 25 degrees Celsius, so that's not particularly hot. So presumably they were quite deliberately keeping fermentation quite cool to try and retain as many of the beautiful aromas as possible. Cuvation, the maceration of the skins, was allowed to go on for 20 days. Now, the wine was put into barrel where it underwent malolactic conversion. They're using French oak here, 27% of which was new. The coopers they've named are Burgundy coopers, so I'm assuming these are 228 litre Burgundy PS barrels. And the wine then aged in barrel for 11 months prior to bottling without any fining or filtration. And the total number of bottles produced was 5,800, so just short of 500 cases. So this is a relatively small production wine. So let's take a look at it, shall we? The first thing that strikes me about this wine is it doesn't have a particularly deep colour. There's a relatively dark ruby, but I can easily see through it. By the rim, it's almost a sort of an orangey, bricky red. There's nice vibrancy to the colour. The wine only has 13% alcohol. It is clinging to the glass. It's quite slow to form tears. I'm not expecting this to be a huge wine whatsoever, but while I've been standing here, I am getting those beautiful aromas. So let's see what we make of those, shall we? Oh, that's absolutely joyous. Beautiful perfumes. These are quite high-toned perfumes. There are sort of slight oak notes there. So to me, it's almost sort of red currants and raspberries. That sort of spicy note you get with a raspberry, but very fresh, very pure. And behind it, there is a slight developed touch of perhaps forest floor, dried leaves, perhaps a hint of tobacco leaf, moving on to lovely truffly touches. Those truffle notes are actually becoming quite rich and very appealing at the end of the aromas there. The aromas are intense, delicate and very attractive indeed. So let's have a taste. Palate is showing a really savoury note. There are notes of tobacco and cedar in the middle of the front of my tongue. However, round the edges of that, the acidity is peaking up some lovely, exciting, bright red fruit. Again, there are notes of red currants, more red cherry on the palate than the raspberry notes I was getting on the aromas. But the acidity is ensuring that lovely, fresh red fruit is staying onto the palate. The drinking window I'm given for this wine lasts from 2019 to 2025. I think I'm seeing hints that the savoury touches are on the verge of overwhelming beautiful, bright, dancing, perfumed fruit. The wine is not particularly weighty. As I say, it has 13% alcohol, and that's not particularly standing out. It's not giving heat, it's not giving roundness, and it's leaving the finish quite fine, quite elegant. Following on from those, on the finish, there are some hints of truffle, and while it's not a big wine, there is actually a lovely smooth, chocolatey texture there. But I think it's a wine whose primary focus is this beautiful, delicate, elegant red fruit. Now, I think the wine's reached a point where very soon that will no longer be its primary focus. The wine is delicious now, and in fact the red fruit has a lovely intensity that's starting to reassert itself subtly on a delicate, elegant finish. Now, looking at the WineSearcher aggregated critic score, this scores a 92 out of 100. And I think that's probably about the right score for this wine. Having said that, my first reaction to the wine's aromas was that this was a wine that deserved a much higher score than that. And that could point to the fact that a year or two back, it might actually have warranted a slightly higher score. But what I certainly think is wonderful about this wine is the fact that it's so clearly showing its own wonderful individualistic character, and a character based on the place, the soils, and the climate that it's come from. It does come as a real contrast to the much bigger, richer, more structured wine from escarpment that I tried recently. I would also say that I have made other tastings of some of Valli's other Pinot Noirs, and I'll leave links to those in the notes below so that you can make a comparison and hopefully get some sort of idea of the different style that each one has to offer. I will of course also leave a link to the WineSearcher webpage for this vintage of this wine, so you can follow that. You can find out if it or other vintages are available in your market and at what price. So yes, thank you very much for joining me. I hope you have a happy new year. If you have enjoyed the video, do please press the like button. That would be fantastic. If you'd like to watch more of these videos, do please subscribe to my channel. And in doing that, you'll be helping me to develop the channel further. Better still, also set yourself an alert so that you can be notified every time I publish a new video, and that way you won't miss any. If you have any friends you think might like to watch the videos, do please pass it on to them. I really appreciate your endorsement in that way. And if you have any comments, do please pop those in the comments box below. I'd love to know what you think about the wines I'm looking at, the tastings I'm doing, or anything else related to that. So thank you again for joining me, and I do hope that maybe you'll manage to make some time. Come and join me for another tasting in the very near future. But until then, bye for now.